The helicopter landed hard on the pad just before dawn. Its blades were still spinning when the back door opened. Medics moved fast, used to this kind of arrival. But the air felt different this time. There was tension before anyone even stepped forward. On the stretcher lay a Navy SEAL, unconscious, covered in dust and dried blood. His uniform had been cut open in places during the flight. His chest rose shallowly. Monitors beeped in uneven rhythms. He had already lost a dangerous amount of blood, and everyone there could see it, but no one reached him right away. A military working dog stood over the stretcher, muscles tight, eyes locked on every person who came close. The dog's fur was dark and matted with dirt. One paw rested on the edge of the stretcher, as if claiming it. Low in its throat came a warning growl, steady, controlled, and serious. This was not panic. This was protection. The medics froze. They had dealt with injured soldiers before. They had dealt with scared dogs before, too. But this was something else. The dog was fully trained, highly disciplined, and clearly making a choice. Easy, one of the medics said softly, holding his hands out, palms open. He took a slow step forward. The growl deepened. The dog's ears stayed forward. Its body did not move back an inch. Everyone stopped again. The SEAL had been brought in from a classified operation overseas. Details were limited, but the signs were clear. Something had gone wrong. Very wrong. The team had taken fire. Evacuation had been rushed. The dog had not left the SEAL side once. Not during extraction. Not during the flight. Not now. A handler stepped forward next. He spoke in calm, familiar commands, using the tone meant only for working dogs. He used the dog's call signs, training cues, and release words. Nothing worked. The dog did not snap or lunge. It did not bark. It simply stood its ground, eyes sharp, breath slow, growl constant. It was guarding its partner the only way it knew how. A senior doctor checked the monitors from a distance. Blood pressure was dropping. Oxygen levels were unstable. "We don't have time," the doctor said quietly. The handler nodded, sweat forming on his forehead. He knew the dog well. He also knew this was dangerous territory. Forcing separation could break years of conditioning. Or worse, trigger a defensive response no one wanted. Security personnel stood by, hands hovering near tranquilizers. No one wanted to use them. Sedating a combat-trained dog in this state could cause confusion, aggression, or long-term damage. And there was another risk no one liked to say out loud. If the dog went down, the SEAL might follow. The bond between a SEAL and AK-9 was not like normal handler relationships. These dogs were trained to read heartbeats, breathing changes, muscle tension. They knew when something was wrong before humans did. And right now, this dog believed his partner was still in danger. The medical team tried to work around the dog. One medic slowly reached for the SEAL's arm from the opposite side of the stretcher. The dog's head snapped toward him instantly. The growl stopped. That was worse. "Back!" the handler said sharply. The medic stepped away. The growl returned, low and steady again. Time dragged on, each second heavier than the last. Blood pooled beneath the stretcher. The SEAL's breathing became more shallow. One of the nurses swallowed hard, staring at the floor, then back at the man fighting for his life. No one spoke for a moment. Then the dog shifted slightly, pressing its body closer to the SEAL's chest, as if shielding him. Its eyes never left the room. This was not about obedience. This was about trust. Someone whispered, "He thinks the mission isn't over." The handler didn't respond, but his face said enough. Dogs like this were trained to protect until formally released. And sometimes release didn't come in the usual way. The doctor made a call. "We may have to sedate the dog." No one answered right away. Sedation would buy access, but it would also erase the only constant the SEAL had known since being wounded. No voice, no awareness, no choice. And still, the clock kept moving. A new nurse stood just outside the circle, unnoticed at first. She was young, recently assigned, still learning how military medicine worked in real life instead of training manuals. She had been told to stay back, to observe, to help if asked. She did exactly that. She watched the dog, not with fear, but with focus. She noticed how the dog's tail wasn't raised in aggression, how its stance was firm but controlled, how it reacted more to sudden movement than to sound, how its eyes kept flicking back to the seal's face, as if checking for signs no one else could see. She also noticed something else. When certain words were spoken, rank titles, medical terms, even the SEALs unit mentioned quietly, the dog reacted, not aggressively, just enough to show recognition. The nurse said nothing. Not yet. Another attempt was made. A senior officer stepped in, voice firm, authority clear. Stand down. The dog did not move. Authority meant nothing here. The SEAL's monitor alarm spiked suddenly. A sharp, urgent sound filled the room. The doctor didn't hesitate this time. We're losing him. The handler clenched his fists. The security officer raised the tranquilizer slightly, waiting for the final order. The dog's head lowered, pressing briefly against the SEAL's shoulder. A soft sound escaped its throat, not a growl, not a whine. Something quieter, almost human. It was then that the nurse took a step forward. Not fast, not slow, just enough to be seen. Stop, the handler said immediately. She did. I'm not going closer, she said calmly. Her voice was steady, even though her heart was racing. I noticed something. The room hesitated. Seconds were burning away, but something in her tone made people listen. What did you notice? The doctor asked, without taking his eyes off the monitors. The nurse swallowed. The dog isn't guarding the body. It's guarding the status. No one replied. She continued, choosing her words carefully. It's waiting for a signal, not a command, a confirmation. The handler looked at her sharply. What kind of signal? She shook her head slightly. I don't know yet, but I don't think force is the answer. The dog turned its head toward her, just slightly. Everyone noticed. The growl softened. The nurse felt her breath catch, but she didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't reach out. She just stayed where she was. For the first time since arrival, the dog did not see every human in the room as a threat. The SEAL's breathing stuttered again. The doctor made a decision. We try one more minute, he said. Then we sedate. No one argued. The nurse stayed still, her mind racing. Somewhere in the back of her memory, something stirred, an old conversation, a half-remembered detail from training, a phrase she had once heard and never thought she would need. The dog's eyes stayed on her, and the room waited. The room was quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors and the occasional hiss of oxygen. Every second stretched longer than it should. The SEAL's chest rose with shallow, uneven breaths, and his hand twitched once, then again, like he was fighting to come back to life. The medics were ready, poised at the edge of action, but none of them moved. Not until the dog made the first move. The K9 had shifted slightly, still alert, still protective, but it had moved just enough to show that it was watching, not attacking. Every person in the room noticed. Even the seasoned officers, trained to command, to control, to make split-second decisions under fire, stopped in their tracks. There was a pause, a strange kind of recognition that whatever was about to happen would not follow the usual rules. The senior doctor took a step forward, looking over the monitors. He adjusted a knob on the oxygen machine, watching the numbers, listening to the alarms. He whispered to the nurse beside him, "We may not have minutes anymore. We might have seconds." His words were calm, professional, but they carried weight. Everyone in the room felt it. The SEAL's life hung in the balance, and no one could risk triggering the dog. One of the medics tried again, carefully, slowly, moving around the stretcher to approach the SEAL from the side opposite the dog. Every step was measured, every hand gesture deliberate, but the dog shifted, its muscles coiling, tail stiffening slightly, growl low and vibrating through its chest. The medic froze, realizing the dog was faster in sensing intent than any human could ever hope to be. The handler stepped closer, trying to calm the situation. He whispered commands, low and soft, the kind used in training exercises, the kind meant only for the dog's ears. The dog did not react to commands, not by moving, not by growling more. It was as if the dog had stopped hearing everything except the small changes in the room, the way the nurse shifted her weight, the soft click of boots on the floor, the slight rattling of the monitors. The nurse, standing quietly, noticed something the others had not. The dog's eyes were not just on the humans. They were constantly flicking to the seal, scanning his chest, his shoulders, his arms, as if reading signs invisible to the rest of the room. Every twitch, every shallow breath seemed to be measured by the dog. It was waiting for something, and it was patient, impossible as that seemed in the chaos of a medical emergency. A second medic suggested sedation again, a low voice carrying over the tense quiet. "We can't wait anymore. He's losing blood. We need access now." The handler shook his head, jaw tight. "If we sedate him, we risk losing the dog too. The dog isn't the enemy. He's reading the situation." The doctor frowned. He looked at the monitors, then back at the dog, then back at the seal. He understood the handler's point, but the clock was merciless. Every second of hesitation could be fatal. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, thinking fast, weighing risks like scales in a courtroom. The nurse stepped slightly forward again, still careful, still calm. "Wait," she said, almost to herself, almost a whisper. But the words carried enough weight that the room paused. The handler turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "Wait for what?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she focused on the dog. She studied its posture, how the ears tilted, how the tail barely moved, how its gaze followed everything with precision. She remembered something from a lecture she had attended a month ago about K9 units, a minor detail about how dogs could differentiate between commands given in public and ones given in coded formats. Her voice was quiet, controlled. I think the dog is waiting for a signal, not a command, a signal of trust, of permission, not from me, but maybe someone it recognizes in a special way." The room went quiet again. That one sentence changed the energy in the room. The idea that the dog wasn't acting out of aggression, but protection, put everything into perspective. The seal's survival depended on understanding that bond, on respecting it. The handler approached the nurse cautiously. "And what signal is that?" he asked. She shook her head, uncertain. "I don't know yet, but it's something he understands, something the seal has taught him to trust." The senior doctor exhaled slowly, feeling both relief and frustration. "We don't have time for guessing. The seal is fading. Every moment counts. If we wait too long, then we find the signal." The nurse interrupted. Her voice was firmer now, more certain. "We have to." The handler studied her. He had been in situations where intuition mattered more than protocol. He nodded slightly. "Okay, you lead. Carefully. Slowly. Don't spook him." The nurse took a deep breath and stepped closer, carefully keeping her distance, letting the dog see her clearly, but not as a threat. She remembered every detail about military K9S she had learned. Tone mattered more than words. Posture mattered more than motion. Confidence mattered more than anything else. She spoke softly, almost inaudibly, phrases she hoped might be familiar to the dog, fragments of language from unit training manuals, words sometimes used as recognition codes. The dog's ears twitched. Its eyes darted to her for a fraction of a second longer than before. She paused, heart hammering, sweat forming on her forehead. The room held its collective breath. Still nothing else changed. The doctor muttered under his breath, "We're losing him." The seal's chest heaved in shallow gasps, blood pressure dropping, monitors screaming subtle alarms. The nurse swallowed, knowing hesitation could cost a life, but she refused to panic. She had to trust the dog, trust the connection she couldn't fully see but could sense. She remembered something else, a subtle tip she had been given during orientation about how some seals trained their dogs. Certain phrases, carefully chosen, could signal permission for intervention without the operator being conscious. Rarely used, often forgotten, but effective. She waited until the room was still, until the dog's gaze rested firmly on her. Then she spoke one word, low and steady, almost like a prayer. The dog's head tilted slightly, the growl softening. Not gone, not completely, but enough for the medics to inch forward without being attacked. The handler's jaw relaxed a fraction. The dog's body language shifted. It was still alert, still protective, but it was assessing now, not threatening. The nurse took a careful step closer. Her hand stayed at her sides. She didn't reach. She didn't call the SEAL's name. She just waited. Slowly, the dog shifted back slightly, enough for the medics to access the SEAL's arm. They moved like shadows, precise and silent, working around the dog's watchful presence. The room was tense. Every breath felt louder than usual, every step measured. And yet, there was hope now, a tiny, fragile thread of it. The dog's eyes never left the nurse. It was clear that it trusted her, or at least it recognized something in her tone, her posture, something that said, "I am not a threat." A senior nurse whispered, "I've never seen anything like this." The handler nodded. "It's not common. These dogs are trained for life or death situations. They know instinctively when someone is a threat. And right now, he knows we're on his side, sort of." The doctor moved in carefully, checking 4 lines and vitals, doing what he could without alarming the dog. The SEAL's blood pressure was still dropping. The monitors were screaming subtle warnings. Every second mattered. The young nurse stayed still, breathing controlled, keeping her focus entirely on the dog. It was her connection, her bridge between life and death in that room. Minutes passed like hours. The medics worked quickly, efficiently, while the dog maintained its protective stance. No one touched the SEAL without the dog's silent consent. Every action was acknowledged by a flick of the dog's ear, a shift in its stance. Finally, the SEAL was stabilized enough for urgent intervention. His vitals had improved slightly, enough to be moved safely. The dog stepped back slightly, still alert, still watching, but letting the human team do their work. The handler exhaled, his body relaxing for the first time since arrival. "Good job," he said quietly to the nurse. She nodded, not smiling, not celebrating. There was still work to be done. Lives were still at stake. But she felt a quiet satisfaction, a subtle acknowledgement that trust, real instinctive trust, had made all the difference. The medics prepared the SEAL for surgery. The dog stayed close, never leaving his side, but now it allowed the humans to help. It was a fragile truce, built in seconds and held by respect and understanding. The nurse stayed in the room, silent, watching the team move efficiently. She realized that sometimes human skill alone isn't enough. Sometimes survival depends on understanding instincts, on reading signs no one else can see, on connecting without words. And in that quiet, tense room, with life hanging in the balance, she understood why the dog had refused everyone else. It wasn't stubbornness. It wasn't aggression. It was loyalty. And it would not let anyone violate that bond, except someone who could speak the language it understood. The SEAL's breathing became more even. The room's tension eased slightly. The dog laid down cautiously beside the stretcher, eyes never leaving his partner. The medics exchanged quiet nods, grateful but wary. Every action from this point forward had to honor the bond that had just been recognized. For the nurse, it was a lesson she would never forget. Human lives, even the most trained, the most disciplined, could depend on trust, intuition, and quiet courage in ways that textbooks and protocols could never teach. The room was quieter now, but not peaceful. Monitors beeped steadily, machines hummed softly, and the faint smell of antiseptic hung in the air. The SEAL lay on the stretcher, his chest rising and falling with slightly more strength, but he was still in critical condition. The dog sat beside him, taut muscles still ready, eyes sharp, ears flicking at every sound. It did not trust the humans fully yet, and the nurse knew that any wrong move could undo the fragile progress they had made. The handler leaned against the wall, arms crossed, studying the dog and the SEAL. He had been in countless missions, faced countless emergencies, but nothing quite like this. The dog's behavior was not normal. It had never let anyone approach its partner like this before, not even medics, not even officers. And now, for some reason, it was listening to the nurse. That tiny shift had bought precious minutes. But the question remained, how could they get full access to the SEAL without provoking the dog? The nurse stepped closer, keeping low, calm, and slow. She had been thinking hard, replaying fragments of memory from training sessions she had barely paid attention to. Something about unit protocols, about recognition codes, about trust signals. It was faint, almost forgotten, but she clung to it. She whispered to herself, softly, almost like a chant. It's something small, something only he would know. The handler noticed her focus. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I think there's a phrase," she said quietly, glancing at the dog. A phrase the seal uses to tell the dog it's safe. A release signal. Something no one else would know. The handler's eyes widened slightly. "Those are rare. Very few people know them. And if you get it wrong—" "I have to try," the nurse said. Her hands stayed at her sides. She did not move closer. She did not raise her voice. She just spoke softly, letting her memory guide her. For a long moment, nothing happened. The dog's gaze stayed locked on her. Its body was tense, ready to react. Every person in the room waited, holding their breath. Then, slowly, the dog's ears flicked back. Its growl faded almost entirely. It shifted slightly, moving just enough to create a small opening around the seal. The humans could now approach cautiously, but only if they stayed calm. The nurse felt a flicker of hope. Her instincts told her she was close. She remembered another detail, a hint from the briefing she had once heard about how seals train their dogs to respond to specific sequences of words, often combining them with tone and rhythm. It was a code, simple, short, but incredibly effective. She whispered it, almost in a monotone, barely audible. A sequence of words that sounded meaningless to anyone else, but carried a deep meaning for the dog. The dog's head lifted slightly. Its tail twitched once. It sat back on its haunches, still alert, but no longer threatening. The handler exhaled slowly. "You've got him," he said quietly. "Careful now. One step at a time." The nurse nodded. She knew this was just the first stage. The seal still needed urgent care. Every second counted. The medics moved slowly, like they were dancing around a dangerous rhythm. They adjusted IVs, checked vitals, and prepared for emergency surgery. The dog stayed close, watching but no longer blocking. The seal's fingers twitched. His eyes flickered under closed lids. The dog's ears pricked instantly, scanning his partner's every movement. The nurse noticed a subtle sigh of relief, almost invisible, as the dog seemed to acknowledge that someone trusted had spoken on behalf of the seal. The doctor moved in carefully, checking the wound on the seal's leg. He muttered, "Still losing a lot of blood, but stable enough to move him." The handler nodded. "Good. That phrase, you didn't just calm him. You earned his trust. That's remarkable." The nurse kept her voice low. "I just remembered what I was told once. I never thought I'd need it like this." The team prepared to lift the seal to a gurney. The dog moved with them, keeping its body between the seal and the rest of the team, but allowed the hands that were guided by trust to touch him. Every motion was cautious, deliberate, precise. The nurse followed, walking slowly behind the stretcher. She watched the dog's reactions constantly. If it flinched or growled, they would pause. If it relaxed, they moved. The dance was delicate, but it worked. Once they reached the operating room, the dog hesitated at the door. The nurse knelt beside it, speaking softly. She repeated the phrase, the rhythm, the tone, perfectly. Slowly, the dog stepped aside, allowing the medics to wheel the seal in. It stayed close to the door, vigilant but cooperative. The seal was placed on the table. Monitors were hooked up, IVs secured. The team worked quickly. The dog stayed outside the sterile field, ears pricked, muscles tight. Every now and then, it glanced toward the seal, as if counting breaths, checking responses, waiting for signs of danger. The nurse stayed near the dog, her presence calming it. She realized something important. The dog's trust was fragile. It could be lost in a second, and if that happened, the seal's recovery could be compromised. Her job was not finished yet. She had to maintain that bridge. Minutes passed. The surgery team worked efficiently, removing debris from wounds, repairing tissue, stabilizing blood flow. The seal's vitals began to improve slowly. The dog noticed immediately. Its posture eased slightly, but it did not relax fully. Its eyes remained sharp, following every movement, every sound, every small change in the room. The nurse spoke to the dog softly, repeating fragments of the code here and there, just enough to reassure it. The dog's tail moved slightly, almost imperceptibly, a small sign of recognition and understanding. The handler approached her quietly. "You really did it," he said. I've never seen a rookie nurse earn AK-9's trust like this. Not in a life or death situation. Not like this. The nurse shook her head, focusing on the dog and the seal. It wasn't me. It was remembering what he taught the dog. I just reminded it. That's all. The seal's chest rose more steadily. The monitors began to show positive signs. The team exchanged quiet nods of relief. They were still in a critical phase, but the immediate danger had passed. The dog, still vigilant, allowed the humans to continue working. The nurse realized something else, watching the dog. Loyalty like this was not taught in hours or days. It was built over years, forged in training and in missions, strengthened by trust and instinct. And now, for a few brief moments, she had become part of that chain. The surgery continued. The dog stayed near the door, watching, waiting, but not aggressive. The nurse spoke softly again, keeping the tone steady, the rhythm of the code clear. Every time she did, the dog's tension eased, just slightly, just enough to let the humans work without fear, after what felt like hours, but was really only a tense stretch of minutes. The surgery team finished the initial stabilization. The seal was moved to an intensive care unit, monitors attached, medications flowing. His breathing was steady, his blood pressure more stable, and for the first time, the medics allowed themselves a quiet sigh of relief. The dog remained at the ICU door, lying down but alert. The nurse stayed near, repeating the code softly, reassuring it. The handler stood behind her, watching, impressed by how calmly and effectively she had handled the situation. Finally, the doctor spoke, almost in disbelief. He's going to make it. The seal is going to survive. The room erupted quietly, not with cheers, but with relieved smiles, nods, and a few whispered words of thanks. Everyone had worked together, but it was clear that the bridge between the dog and the nurse had been the key. The nurse knelt briefly, looking at the dog. "You did amazing," she said softly. The dog's ears twitched in acknowledgement. It was not praise it needed, but trust. It had recognized her as someone who understood. The handler approached again. "You should be proud," he said. "Not many people could do what you just did. You saved him, in your own way." She shook her head, feeling a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. "I just remembered. That's all. I just remembered what he would want the dog to hear." The dog shifted slightly, as if agreeing. It stayed by the door, loyal and watchful. The nurse realized the truth. Sometimes, saving a life wasn't just about medical skill. It was about understanding, intuition, patience, and respect. It was about listening to things that couldn't be measured with monitors or charts. Sometimes, it was about hearing what only a dog and a soldier could understand. And in that room, amidst machines, monitors, and the quiet hum of equipment, a connection had been made. A bond forged in instinct, memory, and trust that would not be forgotten. The seal was safe for now. The dog was still protective, still vigilant, but no longer a barrier. And the nurse had learned something she would carry for the rest of her career. In moments of life and death, the smallest acts, the smallest words could change everything. The seal had been moved carefully into the intensive care unit. The machines around him beeped steadily, alarms softer now, controlled, as if the room itself had settled into a rhythm. His chest rose more evenly. His fingers twitched with life instead of just reflex. The medics had stabilized him as best as they could, but it was clear that the fight wasn't over. The danger wasn't just physical. It was still the silent tension in the room, the need to maintain the fragile bond between humans and the dog that had refused to let anyone touch him. The dog remained at the door, sitting upright, muscles coiled, eyes sharp. It did not relax. Not fully. It was not aggression. It was protection, vigilance, loyalty. The handler stood nearby, arms crossed, watching both the dog and the seal. He had seen combat dog before, but the intensity of this one's attachment was rare. Few could match it. Fewer still could calm it without the proper knowledge or instinct. The nurse stayed close to the dog, speaking softly, repeating the phrases that had worked earlier. She had learned to control her tone, her rhythm, her breathing, and in doing so, she had built a bridge of trust that the dog could not ignore. The dog had allowed the medics to stabilize the seal earlier, but now, the next challenge was ensuring full treatment, checking wounds, changing bandages, starting antibiotics, monitoring vitals closely. It would be impossible without the dog's cooperation. The doctor, standing at the edge of the room, looked at the nurse with a mixture of relief and concern. "We've bought time," he said quietly, "but we can't stop here. We need to check everything thoroughly, and he'll need surgery soon. The dog can't stay a barrier forever." The nurse nodded. "I know. I just need him to trust me fully first. That's the key." The handler leaned closer, voice low. "Do what you have to. He listens to you. No one else right now." The nurse felt the weight of those words. Responsibility, fear, hope, all pressed against her at once. She focused, calming herself, tuning into the dog's movements. Every twitch of the ear, every shift of the paw, every low growl or subtle bark meant something. They were all messages. The dog was watching, evaluating, measuring risk, and she had to communicate through her presence and her voice. Slowly, carefully, she spoke the code again. This time, not just a word, but a sequence, a rhythm, a pattern that the dog recognized. The dog's growl softened completely, a low vibration fading into silence. Its tail twitched slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough to signal the medics that it was safe to move closer. The nurse gestured subtly to the team. "We can start now, but slow, step by step, one motion at a time." The medics nodded, moving like shadows, hands measured, voices quiet. The dog did not leave its position by the door, but it allowed them to approach the seal. It watched, alert but not threatening. Every incision, every touch, every adjustment of a monitor was accompanied by the dog's watchful eyes, ensuring the humans were acting correctly. The doctor knelt beside the seal, examining the wounds. The young nurse handed instruments, monitored vitals, and kept a careful eye on the dog. The tension in the room was high, but it was a controlled tension, a shared understanding that every move mattered. Minutes stretched, but slowly, the seal's condition improved. His blood pressure rose, vitals stabilized, and color returned to his skin. The dog's stance relaxed slightly as it recognized that the immediate danger was decreasing. It still watched, still guarded, but its rigidity softened. The nurse spoke softly to the dog, almost a whisper. "It's okay. They're helping you." The dog's ears twitched in acknowledgement. Small signs, subtle movements, were all that communicated the message. The dog was not naive. It understood danger better than any human in the room, but it was beginning to trust the nurse. Fully, completely. The handler moved closer, keeping his voice low. "You've done it. He's letting us work. This is rare. Very rare." The nurse shook her head slightly, focusing entirely on maintaining the dog's trust. "I just followed the signal. I let him decide." The doctor carefully checked the seal's limbs. The wounds were cleaned, suture were necessary, and bandages replaced. Antibiotics and fluids were administered, carefully monitored. Every step was deliberate, slow, and careful, because the dog's trust was still fragile. Any sudden move could undo all the progress they had made. The nurse realized that the dog's presence was more than physical protection. It was psychological, a stabilizing force of the seal. The bond between them was profound. The dog was not just guarding a body. It was guarding the essence of its partner's life. It had refused all others, but now, because of the nurse, it allowed life-saving treatment. That realization weighed heavily on her. Hours passed in careful procedure. The seal's vitals continued to improve. Monitors beeped in regular rhythms. The dog, still alert, lay at the foot of the bed, ears twitching at every minor noise. It no longer growled. Its body had relaxed enough for the team to move freely, but the alertness never left its gaze. The nurse stayed near, speaking softly, repeating the sequence, maintaining a calm, steady presence. The handler finally spoke quietly, almost in admiration. "You've done something incredible. You've earned his trust. Most people could never do that in 1,000 lifetimes." The nurse felt a mix of pride and humility. She had not acted out of heroism, only instinct and focus. But the result was undeniable. The seal's life was stabilizing, and the dog had accepted human intervention without fear. The doctor leaned back slightly, exhaling. "We've stabilized him. We've got the worst under control. Surgery is next, but for now, he's safe." The nurse glanced at the dog. Its gaze softened fractionally, tail flicking in subtle acknowledgement. The bridge between them had been maintained. The dog was still loyal, still protective, but it trusted the humans enough to allow them to act. The handler nodded to the nurse. You've done more than anyone could have imagined. You didn't just save the seal. You preserved the bond that makes him who he is. That's why he'll survive. The nurse felt a quiet satisfaction. It was not triumph or pride. It was understanding. Understanding the depth of loyalty, the importance of trust, the fragility of life, and the power of patience. The seal's vitals stabilized further. The team carefully prepared him for surgery, explaining their actions softly to each other, moving with precision and respect. The dog watched every step, calm but alert, following the subtle cues from the nurse. Finally, the surgery team was ready. The seal was transported carefully, the dog allowed to remain near the entrance, vigilant but cooperative. The nurse followed, maintaining the connection, repeating the phrase in soft, controlled tones. The dog's gaze remained fixed, but it did not interfere. In the operating room, the seal was placed on the table. The team worked efficiently, monitoring every vital, repairing wounds, stabilizing blood loss. The dog stayed near the door, lying down but alert, ears twitching at every sound. The nurse stayed nearby, quiet, calm, keeping the dog focused and trusting. Hours passed. The seal's condition improved steadily. The doctor checked and rechecked every procedure, every vital, every precaution. The dog allowed full access, never leaving its position but never obstructing. Its loyalty had not wavered, but its trust had been earned. The nurse realized something profound. Saving a life was not just about skill, training, or knowledge. Sometimes it was about understanding instinct, about patience, about communication without words, about being trusted enough to act where no one else could. The surgery ended successfully. The seal was stabilized, moved to a recovery room. The dog followed, staying close, watching over its partner. The nurse knelt briefly beside it. "You did amazing," she whispered. The dog's ears twitched, and it rested its head briefly on the edge of the bed, a small gesture of acknowledgement. The handler approached. "You've changed everything in this room. You saved him and preserved the bond that makes him whole. Few people could ever do that." The nurse shook her head. I just remembered what he would want the dog to hear." The seal's chest rose steadily, monitors showing clear, stable signs. The dog remained vigilant but calm. The human team could finally act freely, confident in the fragile trust that had been earned. In that quiet, tense recovery room, a life had been saved. Loyalty, trust, patience, and instinct had worked together to preserve what mattered most: a soldier and his K9, and a human who understood enough to bridge the gap between them. The nurse stepped back, breathing slowly, watching the dog, watching the seal, understanding in a deep way the power of trust and the value of quiet courage. And for the first time since the helicopter landed, the room felt like it had hope. Not loud, not triumphant, but steady, solid, real. The intensive care unit was quiet now, the earlier tension replaced by a steady hum of machines and the occasional soft click of boots on tile. The seal lay on the bed, breathing evenly, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that finally seemed normal. Monitors beeped in regular patterns, no longer frantic or alarming. The medics moved around him with purpose, double-checking lines, adjusting medications, and making sure that every detail was accounted for. They were calm but alert, still cautious because the patient's journey back to health was far from over. The dog sat at the foot of the bed, head held high, ears pricked, eyes scanning the room constantly. It was alert, but no longer tense, no longer blocking access. Its loyalty and protective instincts were intact, but had recognized that the humans in the room were not enemies. Its gaze shifted often to the nurse, the quiet presence who had earned its trust and had allowed her close. Every now and then, it gave the softest of whines, a sound of acknowledgement, perhaps even gratitude, that the humans could barely interpret. The nurse remained close to the dog, her presence steady, her voice low and calm. She repeated fragments of the secret sequence now and then, not because it was required, but because it helped maintain the fragile balance. The dog had begun to associate her voice with safety, with permission to let life-saving work continue. The handler leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching the scene quietly. He had seen hundreds of missions, countless injuries, countless emergencies. He had worked with many K-9 teams, but he had never witnessed such a connection between a rookie nurse and a combat dog. The dog's trust had been hard-earned, and it had saved the SEAL's life in ways that no human skill alone could have. The nurse glanced at the SEAL. His face was pale but peaceful, the color returning slowly to his skin. His hands twitched occasionally, sometimes reaching unconsciously toward his side, as if sensing the dog's presence even under sedation. It was clear that the bond between them was as deep as ever. She smiled faintly, knowing that the trust she had earned with the dog was the bridge that had made this possible. Minutes turned into an hour. The medics worked efficiently, cleaning wounds, changing bandages, monitoring every vital. The SEAL's breathing was steady. His blood pressure held strong. The dog stayed vigilant but cooperative, allowing the humans to perform procedures with precision. Every soft movement, every calm word from the nurse reinforced the bridge of trust that had been built earlier in the chaos. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The SEAL began to stir. His eyes fluttered, half-lidded, scanning the room before finally resting on the nurse and the dog. A quiet murmur ran through the team, relief mixing with awe. The SEAL's gaze locked on the dog first. The connection immediate, silent, powerful. The dog responded with a soft nuzzle against the edge of the bed, a signal that everything was all right, that he was back, that it had survived. The nurse crouched slightly, keeping her presence gentle, unobtrusive. "You're safe now," she whispered softly. "Everything's okay." The dog's ears twitched, and it let out the faintest sigh, almost imperceptible, as if the tension it held for hours was finally easing. The SEAL's eyes focused more clearly now, taking the room, the monitors, the medical team. His hand twitched toward the dog instinctively, and the dog leaned in closer, allowing a brief, careful touch. The nurse observed silently, knowing that this moment was more than medical recovery. It was a reunion of trust and loyalty, one that could not be hurried or forced. The handler stepped forward, voice low, almost reverent. "He's awake, and he recognizes you. That's rare, very rare." The nurse nodded quietly, her focus still on the dog and the SEAL. "It's their bond. I just help remind the dog it was safe to let us help." The SEAL's lips moved slightly, forming words that were almost inaudible. The dog's ears flicked, body tense but attentive, waiting. The nurse leaned closer, listening carefully. She caught fragments of the words, a phrase that was familiar to her from a unit's training, an acknowledgement, a sign of trust, a release signal. The dog's tail wagged faintly, a small but significant shift. The team exchanged quiet looks. The SEAL was communicating again. The dog was responding. The fragile chain of trust that had been established was holding strong. The SEAL's hand reached out more fully this time, brushing against the dog's head. The dog leaned into the touch, resting its chin lightly on the edge of the bed. The nurse could see the relief in both of their eyes. The human team could finally work freely, and the dog had completed its role as guardian, transitioning now to a silent partner in recovery. The doctor approached, checking vitals carefully. "He's stable," he said softly. "We can start the next phase of recovery now. No sudden movements, and keep the dog nearby. It's important for his emotional recovery as much as his physical." The nurse nodded. She had learned that the dog's role was not just physical protection. It was emotional support, a bridge between fear and calm, between pain and recovery. The dog had refused everyone else, but now it had allowed life-saving work, and its presence was integral to the SEAL's healing process. The SEAL's eyes focused more clearly now. He whispered words of recognition to the dog, phrases that carried meaning only they understood. The dog responded with subtle movements, tail flicks, shifts in posture, soft whines that conveyed acknowledgement and relief. The bond was intact, and it had been preserved through the nurse's patience and understanding. The nurse stepped back slightly, giving them space. She had done her part. She had maintained the bridge, respected the instinct of the dog, and allowed the SEAL to survive when so many moments had been critical. Now, she could watch quietly as the natural bond resumed its place at the center of the recovery process. The handler approached her, voice quiet but firm. You've done something extraordinary here. Most people wouldn't have even thought to try what you did. You earned the dog's trust in a way that saved a life." The nurse shook her head, a faint smile on her lips. "I just remember what the seal taught the dog. That's all. I just helped it remember that it was safe." The seal began to speak more clearly now, words forming as the sedatives wore off. He thanked the nurse quietly, not with grand gestures, but with sincere, calm acknowledgement. The dog stayed close, head resting near the seal's hand, ears pricked, alert, but relaxed enough to allow full human contact. The medics began the process of transitioning him to a stable routine, monitoring vitals, administering medications, keeping the environment calm. The dog stayed with him through it all, a silent guardian, now cooperative, now part of the healing process rather than an obstacle. Hours passed. The seal's color returned, strength slowly built, and the dog's relaxed vigilance never left his side. The nurse observed quietly, realizing that the connection she had maintained would continue to play a critical role in recovery. The dog's instincts were finely tuned to its partner's needs, and its presence would give the seal both confidence and comfort as he regained strength. The team worked quietly, efficiently, respecting the bond between the seal and his dog. The nurse felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not pride, not triumph, but understanding that sometimes saving a life was about more than medical skill. It was about intuition, respect, patience, and the ability to communicate in ways that went beyond words. As night fell, the room was calm. Machines hummed softly. The dog lay alert but relaxed at the foot of the bed, and the seal rested with steady breathing. The nurse stepped aside, breathing in deeply, feeling the weight of exhaustion, but also the quiet triumph of having helped preserve a life and a bond that mattered more than any protocol or procedure could convey. The handler placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You've done something few people could. The seal owes you more than he can say right now. But the dog will always remember you. And so will he." The nurse nodded quietly, her gaze on the dog, on the seal, on the team that had worked seamlessly together. "I didn't do it alone," she said softly. "The dog chose to trust me. I just helped it remember what it already knew." The seal stirred slightly, eyes fluttering open fully this time. He reached out slowly, hand brushing against the dog's head. The dog leaned into the touch, tail flicking once in quiet acknowledgement. The connection between them was complete. The nurse watched, heart steady, knowing that the life she had helped protect would continue, and the bond that had been nearly broken in a moment of chaos was now stronger than ever. In that quiet room, with machines humming and the night outside calm, a life had been saved. Loyalty, trust, patience, and courage had worked together, guided by intuition and understanding. A rookie nurse, a seasoned seal, and a combat dog had created a story of survival and connection that would never be forgotten. The seal whispered one final phrase to the dog, a signal of recognition and gratitude. The dog responded with a gentle nuzzle. The nurse smiled faintly, watching the moment, understanding fully the power of trust, the importance of patience, and the quiet courage it takes to bridge worlds. The world of humans, the world of instincts, and the world of life itself. For the first time in hours, the room felt calm. Not loud, not triumphant, but steady, solid, real. A life had been preserved, a bond had been honored, and a rookie nurse had quietly proven that courage sometimes comes in whispers, patience, and the willingness to listen to things no one else can hear.